Hello and welcome back to Read Becca. This is my weekly catch up on everything I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading. And I had a bit of a mixed week this week. I read 3 things and didn't enjoy them all. So let's start with the one I liked the least, and that was In the Watchful City by Qiouyi. Now, I remembered when this was initially announced, it sounded very much like my thing, and so I had very high expectations for this, and I think that's probably why it was a bit disappointing. And I think, what is this about? I don't actually know. So it starts with this framing story almost, where we have 2 characters. We have Anima, who is sort of an law enforcement officer almost, an overseer, not in the policing sort of way, but more in the civil servant sort of way, it seems like. And Anima does this by body jumping, more or less, into the bodies of animals. And some of these are seemingly normal animals, some of them are biotech creatures. So we have a little bit of world building there, but it's not significant enough that I really understood what was going on. As well, this character lives in a world where humans are attached to these pods that are connected to a tree. And it's not clear, again, if this is truly an organic tree or if it's some sort of technology. It seems very Matrix-like either way. And the closer to the center these people are, they are in individual pods connected to this tree. And then as they go outward, there are more and more people per pod, so they're in 2s and 3s. And I think what I got out of that is that this character is feeling some isolation. So from there, we have Vessel, the second character that shows up. And Vessel is kind of an odd being. They are somewhere between living and dead, and they are traveling around as almost a peddler. It seems they've got this curio cabinet that they're carrying around. And in this curio, they have all of these items, and they're offering to Anima to pick an item, and these items have stories attached to them. So for an item that's selected, Vessel will tell the story of the item, and then Anima is expected to trade something of importance and a story associated with it for that. So what is that all about? I don't know. I never got to the point where this framing story actually explained why that trade was important, or what it meant. Vessel keeps seemingly offering these stories, even unprompted. They're completely unprompted, and demands the trade, but just keeps offering and casually, and doesn't seem to really care about needing to get the trade at any timeline. So it's not clear why this trade was needed, or the significance of these items, or how they connected to the rest of this world. I didn't understand it. So what that means is that within this framing story, we keep jumping to short stories. So for me, this would have been a very successful short story collection, but selling this as a novel did not work for me. It's not cohesive at all. I spent a huge amount of time trying to extract meaning and connectedness that I didn't find. So the short stories, the first one is almost like a Western about a quest for a cactus blossom. Then we have 2 that are kind of almost historical China elements, but in a future. So the first one is about a trans character and foot binding. I had pretty big problems with the fact that it is getting to the line of talking about bodily mutilation and a trans character associated with that, and I think that maybe was not the right way to go, perhaps. But I do think, especially based on the author's note at the end, my read on that is that it is talking about a problematic expression of femininity that is very culturally grounded, in ways that I've talked about similar things with things like hijab and high heels, where we have these things that are both oppressive and empowering at the same time because of their cultural context. So I think that's what it was doing there, but I really don't like the idea of associating a trans character specifically with bodily mutilation. So then there was kind of this Chinese historical situation that was more military and dynastic. It followed a lot of military memos and interviews, that sort of thing. And I almost started to see connections in this one where I was like, oh, I can see maybe where this is going, and it completely didn't. They did not connect up in the way that I was thinking it was kind of forecasting. And then I think the final story really was one about a mermaid. And again, there were some things that concerned me about this one, but it had to do with bodily mutilation and body disconnection that seemed to align with transness. So I didn't really like that. But the overt message of that one, there was a very overt, very heavy-handed message of that one that was much more like vegetarianism, I assume, that was just so heavy-handed and unsubtle that I didn't really love that one. But the mermaid story and the foot biting story were the most evocative, I think, and they did make me think, so they had an effect there for sure. And I don't know if I would have had as much to think about if they had just stuck with kind of simplistic themes. But so with all those stories, they never came together to make a larger whole. To me, it felt a lot like Dirty Computer, the movie by Janelle Monáe, which I enjoyed, but it, as a music video project, was good, I think. But as a movie, it was not very good. It was clear that the framing story was not doing a ton of fresh stuff. A lot of the storytelling elements were things I'd seen before. And the music videos within it were clearly not made to purpose. So they felt very shoehorned in. And that's really what this felt like. It felt like we had these kind of disparate stories just jammed into this framing story that never tied together for me. So the other thing is formatting. So a lot of this is kind of normally formatted, but there are sections, like I had mentioned, one of the short stories is told in like letters and interviews. There is some poetry, but for instance, this section here, this is where Anima is telling their story and kind of a backstory almost of their life. And it's formatted like poetry. It's definitely not poetry though. So my mother blanketing a bed of bulgur with steaming chicken and eggs as I set the table in anticipation of my father's return. He thinks about how much it costs to put food on the table, a roof over our heads, clothes on our backs. Much as he loathed telling lies and half-truths, my father could not refuse his client's request. So that's just sentences that have been spaced out over the page, right? That's just, there's no reason for it that I could tell. And that is really the biggest theme of the problems that I had with this, was I was left asking why constantly. Why is this structured like this? I never found it. On this page, I'm hoping this will come through, but you can see that there are open and close parentheses in odd formats here. And so I tried matching up the sections with open and close parentheses repeatedly in different ways and never could get any sort of additive out of it. So it doesn't seem like it's there for any reason, or if it is there for a reason that the author really had a strong intent for, it's not well communicated to the reader. I just couldn't find anything to get out of that. So I found a lot of things were style over substance, maybe, which I have had examples of books that I've really enjoyed that were like that, but this I just really didn't get along with. I wound up kind of angry at the amount of time that I spent trying to extract meaning out of this and not getting any. I was left wondering why is this element here? Why is the format like this? Why are the stories in this order? How do they connect back to each other? And at the end, I didn't have answers to any of that. So I think as well, something else that I perhaps am biased against in this, that I have to say this may work better for you, the framing story really felt very cyberpunk. and I just tend to not get along with cyberpunk a lot. Something about the storytelling conventions of the genre don't work for me. But then the world building, what little of it is there, seems more kind of biopunk, and I have not read enough biopunk to know whether it follows the same conventions in terms of storytelling, or is more of a world building element. So at the beginning, I was kind of like, is this cyberpunk? Maybe? And then immediately there was like a pop-up sex scene, which is very common in cyberpunk. And there's always some random sex scene that just comes out of nowhere. In this case, it was a masturbation scene, where it's very graphic. There's no clear reason for it to be there. It doesn't tie into the story at all. And that was the theme for this, really, is that, yeah, I just didn't have any answers for why things were done. And either, as I said, they didn't have a reason, or they did have a clear reason, that the author really had intent, which I think is probably true, but wasn't well communicated. And that's also bad. That's just not good writing. The author should be communicating with the reader. So I just wound up pretty disappointed overall in this one. As a short story collection, this would have been solid and very good, but as a novella, like selling this as a novella, it did not work at all for me. So unfortunately, that one's a disappointment. Gladly, I got it out of the library. The next one that I read was considerably more successful, and that was Wake, The Hidden History of Women-Led Slave Revolts by Rebecca Hall and illustrated by Hugo Martinez. And this one is a nonfiction graphic memoir sort of thing. So I would say I was expecting this to be more just historical accounts of the slave revolts, and it's not that. This is really an account of Rebecca as a historian researching those accounts and how difficult it was to find information about that. So there are a lot of situations where they are in archives and traveling around to go to where libraries or businesses have this historical information. And what I did really take away from this was just how little people cared to record the lives of these women. So in many cases, she had to read between the lines to get the information that she needed, or to understand that there was a woman behind something. Because even when there were trials or women were executed for their involvement, who they were was not recorded. Things they said was not recorded because no one bothered to record information about these women. And so that was, I think, the main thing I took away. I don't feel like I learned a ton more than I knew about slavery in general or about slave revolts particularly. I think it was interesting to learn on top of that women being overlooked was actually a tool that allowed them to kind of be key to these revolts where people weren't watching them as closely because they were so ignored. And so I think that was a takeaway. I do think this would be really great for like a teen audience who doesn't have a lot of the kind of foundational information that I have about just general slavery. So I think that was extremely solid though. And I think the only other thing is the art styling. I had mentioned it's not really my style. It is a very dark, heavy black lines. So that's not really my style. I think the text, unfortunately, is incredibly small. So for this, made it very difficult to read with how much text there is in here. But I really enjoyed what she had to say. And I want to read just a small example here. History written by the victors always erases resistance, and those of us who live in the wake learn that we were inferior and needed to be conquered and enslaved. This is the afterlife of slavery that the victors need us to inhabit, one in which we have always already lost and have accepted our fate as handed to us. But we always resisted slavery. Our constant resistance was central to bringing about slavery's end. So I think that's such an important message with things that are going on in the world right now, in the US right now particularly, because people are trying to silence that real history and saying that it's making people uncomfortable to teach real history or to adapt to the history that we know now rather than the view of the victors. So I think this is an important message for a lot of people that need to hear it, especially, as I said, I think this would be really accessible to teenage readers that are, getting a lot of censored work right now. So I definitely did enjoy that one. Thirdly, I finally finished The Dark Forest by Cixin Liu and translated by Joel Martinsen. And I'm going to talk about this one, and it's a sequel, so if you don't want to hear anything about this, then I will this is the last book I'm going to talk about, so jump to the next point. But I don't think I'm going to spoil anything any more than the title even does. So this one was so difficult reading right now because this follows along from the three-body problem, and it doesn't really contain any more of the actual three-body problem element. The first one featured first contact, and so this one is really dealing with the fallout of that. Part one is so focused on the Earth reconciling itself with what do we do? Like, how do we react? And there was some very familiar sentiments here. So the ultimate crisis that Earth is now facing means that open technology is the unavoidable responsibility that advanced countries have to all humanity. The socialized technology movement found a unanimous response from developing countries and even won the support of some members of the EU. But all related initiatives were rejected at meetings of the UNPDC. At the 5th special session of the UN General Assembly, a proposal by China and Russia of a limited socialized technology plan that advocated making technology open to all permanent members of the PDC was vetoed by the US and Britain. The US government said that no form of socialized technology was realistic, that it was a naive idea, and that under the present circumstances, US national security was a priority, and the failure of the limited socialized technology proposal caused a split among the technological powers and led to the bankruptcy of the plan to establish a united Earth Space Force. The implications of the frustrated socialized technology movement are far-reaching, and people have been made aware that even in the face of the devastating crisis, the unity of the human race is still a distant dream. And boy, does that feel too real. I mean, that is exactly what we're seeing in reality right now, where developed, technologically advanced nations are self-isolating and not working together. And it's so frustrating. So the first section is all that. It's the Earth grappling with what to do. The second section does kind of drag for me. It's much slower, and it's hard to suss out the meaning behind it, because what happens in the second section is really this, what they call a wall facer program. And the wall facers are this small number of individuals, there are only a couple men, who are meant to, like, wall facing is like Zen kind of thing, where they're meant to be great minds. And these great minds are meant to come up with plans for how to do things. And everything that a wall facer does is somehow in support of their plan. So they have the ultimate support of everyone in the world, basically, behind them. So they do many strange things. They have whole lives, basically, that you couldn't possibly connect to a larger plan. And in the end, they do all have some sort of plan that plays out, of course, but that means it's extremely meandering. And because this book actually plays out over a very long period of time, we have sort of technological advances so that people can start being hibernated. And so in the middle section, you kind of start to see these key figures just one by one dropping to hibernate for a couple hundred years. And so we go over a long period and eventually wind up 200 years later. And that's where our third part comes. And that's the play out of all of these wall facer plans and kind of what we have remaining. And really that's where the discussion of the actual dark forest theory comes to the fore, where we do have a very technologically advanced society that's been achieved. And that means that the ideology of the people in the last part is completely different from the ideology of the people in the first part. So what is being talked about throughout this is very philosophical questions about how he would deal with things. This is not a standard sci-fi, for sure. It's definitely in that deep thought-provoking. So I think in terms of thought-provoking elements, there's so many in here, but just examples are that at one point someone is describing the idea of great thinkers and innovators, historical figures throughout time, as being swimmers in the river and not having actually changed the flow, but being carried along by the flow of the river of history. And I've never heard it expressed that way. I'm assuming that is something that is a kind of standard example that's used, but I just hadn't heard that before, and it made so much sense to my own beliefs about the way those people come about, that really there is no other option but for these great figures to occur really within time. And so history is pushing them along into the role that they fall into. The other example that I wanted to point out was one where this quote just keeps coming back up over and over again. And the quote is, "If I destroy you, what business is it of yours?" And that's not out of like callousness in the tone, it's indifference, like really severe indifference. And it's meant to be talking about this kind of interplanetary relationship and power dynamic, but I kept drawing the connection to the way we as humanity treat natural resources and exploit them, and animals, where, you know, we have that ideology as beings, as humanity as a whole, of really just acting like because of our position, we have the control to decide to destroy. And I thought that was a really powerful connotation there. It definitely had a lot to say to me, even in just a single line. It's not really massively explored, but yeah, it had a lot of depth to me. As well, this had, toward the end, one of the best, just most well-written explanations of the dark forest theory that I really loved. I'm not going to read that here because I think you should read the book. And so this was definitely one that I really loved. I'm so glad I finally got back to this, because I adored the first book and I can't believe I took so long to get back to it. I really need to get to the third. And in fact, this was amazing for my goals this year, because this is a tome. It's over 500 pages. This is translated, which was not an official goal yet, but it's something I wanted to make sure that I kept reading. And it's a sequel. So I hit 2 goals and one thing that I'm tracking as almost a goal. So yeah. So if I can, I will get to the next one. I think it hits all 3 of those as well. And I would be super happy to finish this series off this year if I can. So the only other thing that I have in progress is The Fall of Babel. I'm almost through part 1, which is like 160 pages. So making decent progress on that one. I'm going to then return my stuff that I finished to the library. And I think I'm probably going to limit to maybe one thing that I pick up today from the library, because I'm expecting to be having my BookTube prize reading coming up. I assume I am signed up. I believe I am, but I have not heard anything, which I think everybody is talking about right now. The prize judging starts on the 1st of February, so I think I'm going to have 6 books to read over February and March. I don't know what those will be, so if I get some chunky things, that will take up a lot of my reading. And so I'm going to be keeping my February reading to be pretty light, small things, most likely. So that's what's coming up in reading. And I will probably have a February TBR up in the next couple days, hopefully. So in life stuff, I'm still feeling the struggle, really, just over mostly general stuff. I don't think I have really anything major. Like everybody, it seems like I know people who are getting sick still, all over the place, but fortunately nobody super severe. Obviously, things have been extremely heavy this week with the discussion around book bans, and specifically the ban of Mouse in Tennessee. I mean, just deeply weighing on me that how horrible this situation is in. I'm thrilled to see that it has, you know, kind of hit bestsellers list and stuff after that, but it's horrifying to see this happening in my lifetime. Going from that end of non-personal things to very personal things, within the past week, someone close to my family has gone from someone I kind of had suspicions about their leanings, but they have become a very rabid social media vocal anti-vaxxer and posting a lot of really anti-government propaganda stuff. And it's not someone that I, strongly care about, or that this is affecting me strongly, but it is someone who is close to my family, who does have a lot of influence over a member of my family. And that's scary. So, that just is certainly weighing on me and very annoying. It is, again, hard to imagine that we are going through the kind of things that I'm seeing said there. And it's baffling. So I'm really mentally and emotionally struggling at this point with just everything that's going on in the world and broader is really affecting me right now. So I don't think I have anything major to talk about otherwise in terms of my life. I have been continuing to stay safe and home. It's been very cold here. Not quite as cold as those of you in the Northeast. I hope those that are getting the potential storms are doing okay. We have been very up and down. So we're gonna have the last cold day, I think today, where we're like highs in the 20s and lows in single digits. And then we're gonna go up to 50, and then we're gonna be back down. So I think we're supposed to get a couple days of snow, which will be the first snow we've really gotten this year. We've gotten some little flurries here and there, but I think it will be the first real accumulation. And it's supposed to get bitterly cold, so like highs in the single digits. So I'm not looking forward to that. That'll be the middle of this week. And the fact that it's been going up and down so much, like really way at like 50s and then down to single digits is brutal. It feels like your body can't acclimate to that. So I feel like when we have just consistent low temperatures, you get kind of used to it. But with this up and down, it's just been really, really difficult. So I'm always cold and uncomfortable. But I think really that's honestly all that's going on. I don't have anything serious to talk about this week. And I already talked more than enough about the books. I'm gonna have to edit a lot of this, I'm sure. I don't have any recommendations because I've been barely keeping up with anything. I did watch basically all of Anne with an E just as a comfort watch, and it's really wonderful. Season 3, they went a little like wildly progressive with it. It's very cool, down to feminism and race, gender, sexuality. They have residential schools depicted there in the true, fully abusive fashion that they were. And that's a pretty big part of a couple of episodes. So I think they did a good job there so far from what I've seen. I haven't actually finished the final season. So I'm disappointed that I think they canceled the show. So very sad, but I really have loved watching it. So that is it for me this week, I think. I've talked way too long, so I hope that you have a wonderful and less stressed out week than I am. I also hope, if you are judging the BookTube prize, that we all get exciting news in the next couple days with our book picks. So hopefully your reading will be great. Thank you so much for watching. My situation here is pretty ridiculous. It's very cold, so I'm laying under the electric blanket with all these cats I've acquired here today while I read through all my tabbed spots in a book so that I can make a video later. And yeah, it's silly. Yeah, you're so sweet, aren't you, Gumbo? I've been roaming around audiobooking and cleaning things, and so I'm documenting this for posterity because this will likely never happen again. But I paired my entire sock drawer, got rid of all the damaged ones that can't be used, and cleaned everything out that was mismatched. So we have a completely cleaned and organized sock drawer. We got another dusting of snow unexpectedly this morning, and the pond is all frozen. It's looking very cool. Oh my. my, it's a 2-cat lap type of day. Pretty sure this will not end well.